I'm very excited, and it kind of feels like my wedding, bar mitzvah, birthday, and funeral all at the same time.
Hi, Kristen
Perfect.
Maldonado here from Pop Culture Planet. Jonah, it's so great to see you again. I'm so excited about this movie. How you doing?
Good, good. Always great to see you. And it's been so fun over the years to be talking about our favorite genre, romantic comedy, and talking about 31 Candles. My second movie ever in theaters out of four. So it's sometimes I just gotta tell myself that that's cool. Like, Xmas was only on Amazon, and so you kind of don't have that surreal feeling of, oh my God, you could show up somewhere and go see this thing. So I'm very excited, and it kind of feels like my wedding, bar mitzvah, birthday, and funeral all at the same time.
I mean, you wrote, directed, edited, and starred in 31 Candles. That's a lot of hats to wear. So, where did the idea initially come from, and when was it kind of that moment where you realized like you needed to lead this to tell the story authentically?
I love that question. And so the idea came from actually after having Make Xmas for Amazon with Leighton Meester and Robbie Amell. As a Jew from New York, we all go down the heritage, the lineage of doing Christmas romantic comedies. And so I was very hyped to do that. And then I said to myself, what if I did something that was like sort of more about my upbringing and my past and the part aside of my family and my life that I've never really explored? And what better way to authentically explore something that we're scared of than through art? And so ultimately I wrote a script that was about this character that was sort of in this in-between part of his life. I also felt that as if I hadn't really seen a romantic comedy that was about kind of like from a guy's POV, like just a movie that was like the Albert Brooks, the Tom Hanks, the Billy Crystal kind of characters I grew up loving. And finally, there was a conversation with my composer, Grant Fonda, who's composed all four of my movies so far, At Midnight, Xmas, Dating in New York. And him and I were talking about like what I was trying to go make as a project next. And he was like, what's the one thing? And I was pitching him two different ideas. And what he was like, what's the one that you could only make now that you could never make at any other time? And I was like, oh, the one where I turned 31 because I'm about to turn 31. So it really helped crystallize and thrust that project forward and, said to myself, I have to do this right now.
Something that I thought was really interesting, you mentioned like coming from your Jewish identity and making Christmas movies and things like that is recently I feel like Jewish representation in film and TV, there's been a little bit of criticism lately about how that's portrayed. And you're using your own experience. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think the one thing I learned about religion, here we go, through the process of making 31 Candles, because through the process of making the film, I consulted a lot of like Jewish experts, people who are, whether they're teachers or rabbis or students of the religion or just Upper West Side Jews or, whatever it was. And ultimately, everyone had a different perspective, which I love because no one could ever do anything right. If you did it one way, there was always a note about doing something another way. And I learned this even through making, funny enough, Xmas for Amazon. As a movie, the questions would always come up. What kind of Christianity is the Stroop family? Would they have this mistletoe? What would they eat? What would the mistletoe? Would they go to church? How would they do it? And I was like, okay, so religion, period, everyone has a different interpretation of it, which I think is like the funniest thing. But for 31 Candles and the Jewish representation, I just wanted to make a feel-good story. There was one of our Q&A hosts, Ari, who was helping with something, said that when you go to the Jewish section of a bookshop, the books are all about the Holocaust or like death or sadness, and it's like never about like happy things. And I thought that was a really funny scene in my head. I'm like, that's hilarious. Like, that's great because like not the great, but it's like it was like funny to me that it was all the sad stuff. And I just wanted to make a film that was joyful. Happened to have a Jewish character, happened to be about a bar mitzvah, but it's also a bar mitzvah that takes place on Christmas Day.
Mhm.
And there's Italian, heritage in the movie. There's the melting pot that is New York City. So it was all about joy. It was just all about joy and being authentic. And, even with the show, like Nobody Wants This, which I know has gotten mixed feedback from people, but that's the thing. No one knows how to perceive themselves on a screen. It's an incredibly nuanced thing to see a mirror image of yourself and say, is that really what I sound like or talk like? And and to then be receptive or not receptive of it is a really nuanced concept. So for me, it was always about a love story and New York City, and everything else happens to be true.
Knowing you and your work, I see so much of your real life in this film. So how did you balance, pulling things, but also having that sort of like fictional element?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the end of the day, the character of Leo, I would always say would just take it one step further than Jonah ever would, and he would never take a hint. That was kind of the rule I gave myself in the character was that like I can take a hint, like Jonah Feingold can, but it was fun to draw from real life. I mean, unfortunately, when you write the scene in Final Draft and you write the name Molly, for example, which is the name of my girlfriend who just moved in with me, you know,
So,
it's not, I think nothing of it. But then you're watching the movie in a theater with her family, and you have this scene, which, there's a scene in the movie where he's with this character named Molly, and they're making out and kind of talking dirty to each other. And I'm like, oh boy, I cannot believe I named her Molly. And it's like, and it kind of hits you more in the face when it's there and done and made.
mhm.
Um, so I would say definitely I leaned in a little bit, but there's a beauty to that too. I mean, on the flip side of that, I named the grandmother after my grandma, same name. And that's, it's incredibly difficult for me to watch that scene on the bench at the third act of the movie. My parents lose it. It can be a beautiful thing. I encourage people to lean into their real life.
A couple of other fun little moments I noticed was the Christmas and New York poster, kind of like seemed like a little nod to your first film, and then the podcasting. I know you started out in podcasting, so that was cool to see. I'm like, oh, look at all these little moments.
I love the Easter egg. Yeah, there's Christmas in New York is the spiritual sequel to Dating in New York in the fictional world of my movies existing. I had a blast coming up with that poster. And then there's even a scene where a lot of the music, we use some of the same themes and music from Dating in New York as well for the in-world characters. Um, so I'm trying to think if I have any Easter eggs near me, but I love that stuff so much. I mean, we're children of the Pixar Disney world where, all those movies have these fun Easter eggs. And I think it just kind of makes things cohesive.
So directing yourself, editing yourself, how hard is that?
No, it's a great question. I think that what I'll say is it's easier than people think it is. There's a psychological barrier you have to get over, and you can only overcome that barrier by having repetition in the gym. So leading up to the making of this film, obviously I had directed three other films. And then from a performance standpoint, I had been making these small vignettes for Instagram for about a year and a half, where I would just sort of monologue and walk around New York. And it was a practice to direct myself and to see what it's like to watch myself on camera, and then to see how, more importantly, an audience would, sorry, my hand keeps going, see how an audience would interpret that. And I think it's really like it's a one or a zero. You can either do it or you can't do it. I do fear as if a lot of actors should not and don't need to be their own director, because it's really hard to edit yourself. On the day, on set, you have a great DP, you have a great AD, you have your producers, there's a support system there to help execute the vision. But when you're in the edit, it's usually you and the editor, or in my case, it was me and me. And it's a very difficult thing to know to subconsciously. I luckily built up the skill set to look at myself as close to objectively as possible. But obviously recognizing the fact that you can never be truly objective, and that there will always be a part of you that's like judging yourself harder than anyone else ever will. So I would say the editorial process is it's definitely a challenge. Things you can do to help, like what I did was I edited the movie in black and white, and I also flipped the frame around. So sometimes, when you're taking a photo on your iPhone, how everything's flipped around, it looks different. I did that in Adobe Premiere as a way to just make it feel like it wasn't as far away from me as possible visually, so I could disassociate and just sort of try to get lost in the story.
Oh, interesting. Very cool. Is there anything that you cut out that you're like, "Ooh, that was actually kind of fun"?
No, it's a great question. I mean, there's a scene where, funny enough, my good friend Kareem Rama, who hosts a show called Subway Takes on Instagram, he had a scene in the movie where Um, he played a bar back, and he was with my ex in the movie. And I go back in and I try to win her heart back, only to realize I don't want her. I want something else. And we felt as if it wasn't necessary, like the character would never go back to this character, to this other person, this
Mhm.
girl again after he sort of had his closure. So I'm bummed that we had to cut that scene because Kareem is so funny in it. But that kind of stuff, you have to trust the emotional train ride of the movie over anything else.
Your character throughout the film calls Ava by her full name. And at
Yes,
the end, he
yes.
finally, kind of breaks that, and you sort of see this like she's off the pedestal. She's like a real person. I'd love to hear a little bit more about those kind of themes as well with the
Oh
film.
my God, I love that question. Yeah, so two answers. One is Leo is a character that overly romanticizes everything in his life. There's a scene where it goes to black and white. There's a scene where he flies off the ground. There's other things that are a big spoiler about the grandmother. But um, we romanticize and we idealize, and I actually think there's nothing wrong with that. I'm like romanticize and idealize away, so long as you somehow stay grounded in your life. And with Ava Shapiro, I just like that when we grew up, we had those friends that were like the two name friends, you know, David Deneroff, Peter Gross. These are, you know, Ava Shapiro, is the classic summer camp crush.
I was
And
definitely the two name friend.
were you a two
Yeah,
namer? Wow, I
Kristen
love that.
Maldonado. Everybody would be Kristen Maldonado.
It's got a great ring to it. I totally see that. I'd call you KM. I think that's kind of a cool nickname. I don't know if that's someone ever called you KM.
Yeah, came out
Yeah.
though. Came out. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Damn, Aldo's cool. No, but like that's what I wanted to tap in on. And then I don't know how familiar you are with the Indiana Jones franchise,
Mhm.
but in The Last Crusade, um, you know, Indiana Jones's dad calls him Junior the entire movie. And then at the very end, when Indiana's trying to, there's like an earthquake, and they're all like in the ditch in the temple, and Indiana's about to fall over this cliff because he's trying to reach for the Holy Grail. Um, and his dad has one hand trying to save him, and Indiana's like focused on this item. And for the first time in the entire movie, Sean Connery he's like, Indiana, don't do it. And he calls him by his name, and it gets his attention. And so I just loved that. Like I love that moment. I think it's such an easy way, like, when you feel strong emotion towards someone, like maybe you change the tone or the way that you call them something.
Mhm.
Like at what point does mom become Nancy in my case? Like I kind of ironically call my mom Nancy all the time, but it's ironic. It's not like real. Um, so yeah, I just think there's a power to the way we address people, and especially in a movie, if you create a rhythm of it and then you change that rhythm, it can have an impact.
I was also gonna say I loved how like you do balance like this like whimsical but modern but then also nostalgic, and then like the way that the opening credits felt like a like an old school Hollywood movie, the credits before everything. I thought that was
The Thank you. I was gonna say on that, this is the first time I've done for At Midnight and Dating in New York. I was very adamant about having hand-drawn opening title cards. In fact, this poster is from the Dating in New York opening credits. And at midnight, I got to work with a very talented Disney illustrator who I commissioned to do our At Midnight title cards. And then Amazon wouldn't let me do that for Xmas. And for 31 Candles, I wanted to continue that trend of opening title cards, and try a new technique, which was using a song that was a sort of already pre-written song. It was an old Irving Berlin song called "After You Get What You Want, You Don't Want It at All," and that's one of the themes of the movie. Is this character who, I mean, I tell the audience right away what the movie is about with that song. So the opening credits I designed in Adobe After Effects, and uh, really loved one major part of it. One is that you get to show who works on the film before the movie starts. So you get to see the cast and the crew, and you get to acknowledge them. And then you get to put the cast under the player's card. And that's what they used to do in old movies, is they used to call, wasn't cast, it wasn't just, the names of the actors, it was the players. And I thought that was a really fun thing to do because at least on my end, I'm like, hey, this is a movie. This isn't real. These are actors. This is like I'm telling you up front. These are the players for the film. So I really enjoy that card, and I enjoy seeing everyone's name on the same card. And to me, it kind of feels like we're all just a little family. It's like seeing a family photo or something like that.
There's so many interesting things I feel like about the way that Leo sort of thinks about love, or the way that the themes of love come up in this story. You know, there's fears that he's incapable of love, or that he could die alone without ever having really been in love. I guess, why was that the story that you wanted to explore? What was sort of like the driving force there?
I made the movie at a time where I was definitely I wanted love in my life. I didn't know what that look or felt like. And I was on again, off again with somebody who I'm now with, which is great. And I was like scared. I was like, well, shit, just like, what if I don't find anybody? Like, I've been spending the past years of my life so committed to making films and having these like situationships, which look, it's New York City. It's dating in New York City is everyone would agree it's difficult.
Yeah.
That's not new news. And but it's so ultimately you look in the mirror and you say, well, what if it just doesn't work out? And that was a big scary theme. So I was like, what if I wrote about that? What if I, write what you're scared of, explore it through the art. It's sort of like a little safety bubble. It's almost like in Wicked where she's floating in the bubble to fly. And it's like you can be in a little floating bubble to explore scary themes, but the problem is ultimately the deeper you get into that tunnel, eventually that bubble will pop and you'll fall and you'll be trapped in that tunnel as deep and dark as your thoughts go. And so I think that that's kind of what drove me to want to make this movie and where it ended up going. And luckily, the good news is it ended with a happy ending.
That's awesome. And it's real too. Like, I mean, I'm from New York also, and
Yeah.
I tell you, I went on like a whole online dating journey. It took 3 years, 50 first dates literally to find my husband. Um,
Oh,
and I was like, you feel that feeling of like, will it ever happen? And now I'm like, oh, here I am, married with a baby. And I'm like,
that's amazing. Well, how did you guys meet?
plenty of fish. I reeled them in.
Oh, wow, I love that. That's awesome.
Yep. But New York dating is hard. It takes a long time to find that right person. So it's so real. And I think that's what's so fun about your stories is that like it's funny, but it's heartfelt and it's real. You're such a rom-com lover. I know that you started your production company, Romantical, working to become the Blumhouse of rom-coms. What is it about the rom-com? There we go. The rom-com that really speaks to you, and has become such a staple in your work.
First off, I love that you went on 51st Dates. I just want to like that. It's obviously a great movie and great narrative, like, great numbers
Yeah.
trial there. And I'm so glad you found the one.
Thank you.
But that also is like, that's the reason why it's like ultimately, when you're in love, you are happier. So like love can equal happiness. Um, I think for me in rom-coms, it started with the movies that I just grew up loving and watching because I think I always didn't like sad endings. And so rom-coms typically have happy endings. And then it became a deeper analysis of the genre where I was like, oh, this genre was kind of born out of the Great Depression. Like in the late 1930s, you had movies like It Happened One Night and Bringing Up Baby and gosh, what was the but all those kind of movies that came out of um Philadelphia Story, all these movies that came out of like Casablanca, like the Great Depression era, and then into a new wave of like happiness and prosperity in America. And those movies really started to explode with people. And I think it's because people wanted to feel happiness and joy. So they did that by going to the theater. And then, of course, the whole like MGM musical era. Um, and I just happened to latch on to that emotion. I like the emotion of being happy. And the romantic comedy genre, I think sometimes it can get misunderstood in that I like films that are romantic and comedic. Doesn't need like The Notebook to me is a movie way bottom of my list compared to maybe a movie like um a movie like Big, which is not necessarily a rom-com, but it is a romantic film and it's comedic. And sometimes romantic can be like even more reflexive. Like a movie itself can be a romantic idea. Like Casablanca is the romantic idea of a movie, and it also is a romantic film, and also is a very funny movie. It's also a very dramatic movie. So that's to me what I love about the genre is that you can kind of play in it however you want. Even if you look at a movie like At Midnight, which was a movie where we played with adventure themes and movie making themes and mistaken identity and or Xmas, which like Xmas is kind of a horror movie if you look at it under the right context. It's about your ex coming back to you during the holidays. Um, so those are the genres I love. And with Romantical, the idea is to bring back that high concept romantic comedy or comedy, comedy romantic movie or romantic comedy movie and fulfill that very strong thirst that I believe audiences have for those kind of films.
What do you have next planned with Romantical?
The next one, Romantical, is really, the word I use to describe it is ecosystem. It's a film studio feels very archaic because no one watches movies anymore, if you look at the box office. But film ecosystem is a word that I'm interested in, which is, you look at a company like Blumhouse, or if you look at what's a good example, I kind of look at the way that Barstool or Disney does what they do, which is they have all these different points of media. They have words, blogs, podcasts, scripted shows, unscripted shows. And for Romantical, it's going to be about that. Certainly going to come from the movies, the same way that Walt Disney had Snow White and Snow White gave you a ride and Snow White gave you Fantasyland and all this stuff. For me, Romantical will always live and die off of the strongest piece of IP, which is the movie. And to me, the first Romantical film will be this movie I'm working on called Young at Heart. And Young at Heart is the story of my parents, 70 years old, divorced, but good friends, who one day wake up in their 20-year-old bodies and decide, are we going to go through life together again, or are we going to do it differently? And it's not a time travel movie. They wake up today and they have to date in New York City as 20-year-olds after having, just gone through their entire, essentially, a long part of their life so far. And that to me represents everything Romantical stands for. It's high concept. It's got a message, which is just like, if you could go back and do it with someone else, would you? Or would you be happy with the life that you are living? And based off that, there will be elements and channels and verticals and things that we'll do. And the dream is that's what Romantical will be built from. And, and that's what gets me excited uh, and kind of up and cranking every day.
I love that. That sounds awesome. It reminds me of 17 again. Did you ever watch the one with like Tia and Tamara?
That is Zac Efron and Matthew Perry.
There's another one
Oh,
a couple years before it, Tia and Tamara.
oh, shoot. Let me write that one down.
Oh
Maybe.
yeah. Oh, it's so good. Some kind of science experiment happens and the grandparents become young again in modern day.
Oh,
It's like the 2000s.
oh, I love this.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is great to know. This is like the movie. I mean, the way I pitch it is something's got to give meets Big.
Oh, okay.
Is kind of like is the tone like I don't know. I saw Big and I was like, shit, this movie. I forget how good this movie is.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna watch this 17. Well, there's two movies called 17 again.
I
Interesting.
know, right? One spelled out and then one the numbers.
Yeah, true, true, true. Yeah. But yeah, that's kind of I think from that, like, if there was to be a thesis in the same way that maybe Snow White and Cinderella were the Disney thesis about hand-drawn animation and fantasy and song and um, you know, I think that Young at Heart represents thematically what Romantical stands for, which is like how you perceive life in a joyful and romantic kind of whimsical way. And it's still not without the larger questions, like um, and that's I think what I want every film to be able to do is to sort of enhance the brand and go hand in hand with what we stand for and what the word means.
What can you tell us about some of the other projects you're working on?
I'm in post-production on a movie called Bus Boys, which is a movie with David Spade and Theo Vaughn, and hopefully we're picture locking that film soon. It's been a really amazing process. Those guys made it on their own. They financed it on their own,
Oh,
and it's been super inspiring to see what they've done with, the independent comedy film and their passion for comedy and their two worlds coming together. And then I was cast in a movie by a good director friend of mine named Diego Lana, who made a rom-com called You Can Do Better. And funny enough, with that movie, Diego emailed me like 3 years ago or maybe 2 years ago and was like, "Hey, dude, I love dating in New York. I'm going to go make my first independent rom-com. Can you give me any advice?" And my advice was like, blah, 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 blah. Pick a start date and go make that movie. And then every 3 months or so, I got an email from him. I'm like, dude, start date, keep doing it. And then one day he's like, I got the start date. We're gonna go do it. And he's like, do you want to play a role in the movie? And I was like, sure, which role? And he sent me the script, and there was this character named Ryan who's very funny. And I said, of course, sure, I'd be honored. And so I got to play this really fun sort of agent character. Um, and I think they're in post-production on that. And, I'm attached to a couple interesting things. It's a hard time in the business. I mean, one of the projects I'm definitely excited about um, is a movie. I think we're trying to figure out what the title's going to be. It's right now it's called Taste of Christmas. It sounds more Christmassy than it is, but it's got Jesse T. Usher and Coral Pena, who are both incredible actors. And we just attached well, I guess I should wait till it's actually formally attached, but we're talking to other cool people too. And that represents the kind of movies I want to make, like elevated Christmas comedies. And it's a challenging time in Hollywood just because the movies I love making rarely get made at a certain budget. But can't let that stop us.
Is there anything else you want to share about the movie before I let you go?
This is just like, it's a truly independent movie. It's financed by 30 different people that invest in the film and dedicated to my grandma. And, if it represents the antithesis of like AI slop and micro drama slop, or not that those are slop, but it represents real artistry and care. And I hope people give it a chance and enjoy it. And the best thing they can do to help the movie is simply talk about it.
I want to thank you for your time. Congratulations. I'm excited to see everything you're working on. And yeah, I'm just so happy for you.
I appreciate you making the time and highlighting the film. And yeah, thanks for watching it and having such incredible questions and talking about it. And hope to see you soon.
Consider subscribing if you like this video and get even more entertainment news at popcultureplanet.com. See ya!